Testing 1, 2. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see such a full lecture theatre. So welcome to the National Maritime Museum, and welcome to the Ice Worlds Festival, all about polar science, old and new technologies, and of course the venerable, majestic RRS Sir David Attenborough research vessel, which is currently moored near the Cutty Sark. So if you haven't seen it already, do go and take a look before it sets off on its first ever mission down to Antarctica. There's lots to take in today and tomorrow. There's exhibits, talks, tours, storytelling, and there's a penguin parade, which kicks off tomorrow at 4 p.m. So if you're around for that, do take part. I'm told there is capacity yet for the Ice World Festival, which has recently increased. So you can scan this QR code with your smartphone, and chances are you will hopefully find a ticket. But for now, we've got our 1 p.m. talk, Antarctic Sea Animals, or Antarctic Wildlife, where we will look at sea life in some of the coldest and remotest places on Earth. Our speaker, Hugh Venables, is project manager at the Rothera Time Series, part of the British Antarctic Survey, which is a program designed to monitor the ocean and climate to understand changes that occur over decades. There will be a chance to ask questions later on, so as the talk progresses and you see some wonderful imagery, do think about the questions that you might want to ask towards the end. And with that, over to you, Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the first thing to say is that although I'm paid to be an oceanographer at British Antarctic Survey, this is very much a hobby talk. I've had 18 months at sea, 6 months on base. So this is the hobby that goes with me, the things that helps pass the time. But in that time, I've seen some pretty cool things, been some pretty amazing places. So just want to take you, sort of go through the areas that we go with on the ship. So this is almost starting at the end, at the very heavy sea ice. There is a bit of wildlife here, there's a snow petrel. But this is kind of when it gets really seriously cold and icy. So getting our bearings, I think anyone who's been in the hall into the great map, we've kind of got an idea. We're in the South Atlantic, Southwest Atlantic, Falklands, South Georgia, South Sandwich, South Orkney, South Shetland, and the peninsula. So it's just going to be a journey through this area and its wildlife, labelling up some of those places that we'll be referring to along the way. The places in blue are our bases. Halley's off the map by a long way. That's a different game, out into the really heavy ice. So it'll be a journey through here. And then again, to get bearings as to sort of how far south we are, although there's a huge amount of ice here, it's not as far south as equivalent to the north. So the Falklands is about level with where we are now. So areas which we're used to as being warm, covered in trees, even as you go up to North Norway, because you've got the warm ocean currents keeping them warm, it's a very different environment to the Antarctic Peninsula, which is cut off. The circumpolar current coming through here very much keeps this area very cold and this area warmer. Whereas around Britain, we get the warm currents, but that's enough oceanography for the talk. Penguins, that's better. So we're going to start at the Falklands. As I say, the Falklands, similar latitude to here. If you go out on a good summer's day, it's a very nice, very pleasant place to be. Beaches look incredibly Hebridean. Anyone who's been to the Outer Hebrides or even perhaps Shetland would recognise most of it, except for the penguin colonies. This is about a 2-mile walk from where the ship moors up, so we can do this after dinner as a nice evening walk. So these are Magellanic Penguins. They nest in burrows, and so they're reasonably secure on the mainland. The beach behind, until very recently, was a minefield, so it was very good for not being disturbed. Also in the Falklands, we've got king penguins, really kind of classic big penguins. They're about up to your sort of my mid-thigh as a size. And they're just out. You can, with care, you can get up pretty close to them, and they're not too bothered. Also on the Falklands, with Gentoo Penguins, where we go more up at the Navy base for refueling. There's about a 10-mile walk and get out to a colony, and just you're free to just be in amongst them. It's really quite a privilege. It was quite windy, so this one just came and sat in my lee. I was sat there in a white t-shirt, black trousers, and it thought I was a penguin, because in their world, if it's lying flat, it's a seal, and if it's upright, it's a penguin. There's not. We've even had penguins that rather join in football matches, because if you're upright and squawky, you're a penguin. We've also got the Rockhopper Penguins. They live up to their name. They come up, they climb up really steep slopes. Even as a human, we're reasonably good at scrambling, but these are getting up some pretty good slopes, which gets them away from the seals, gets them away from some of the predators, like a sea lion that might get into their colony. They're trying to get away from those. And they climb up and feed their chicks. One of the really good things about getting down there is especially if you go down in sort of November or December, you leave from sort of the start of our winter and you turn up in the middle of their spring. And you sort of get another good season, another time to see all the young birds. There's lots of other wildlife on the Falklands. It's reasonably diverse. This is just a couple of examples. So you've got Coscaroba swan, the smallest swan in the world, and the flightless steamer duck. Again, you're on an island, there's not many predators. Things get better at swimming than they do at flying, which is following the penguin's lead on that. The seas offshore from the Falklands can be incredibly productive. So this is part of a bay full of sooty shearwaters, tens of thousands of them. And yes, it's a montage, but it's taken from the same place as surfing Commerson's dolphins coming into the breakers. So they're one of the small dolphin. They come very close inshore. Even when we're tied up, they can come alongside the ship. So this is our previous ship, the James Clark Ross. So yes, we're excited about the new ship, but this was brilliant. We really love it. And so this is what we would go out and do our oceanography on, and we're really looking forward to getting the new ship to replace and improve on that. So we're setting off from the Falklands towards South Georgia on this trip. So we've got more dolphins, Peel's dolphins, hourglass dolphins, and we've got albatross. Albatross are one of the amazing birds to see out there. Huge wingspan, can just ride the wind. Black-browed albatross. Most of the world's black-browed albatross breed on the Falkland Islands, and you can see huge numbers just offshore. One thing to note, which you'll kind of see on other ones, whatever the birds do, however much they're banking with the wind, eyes are level, heads level. They just keep their bearings, make sure they know where they are. These are grey-headed albatross, so these breed on South Georgia. They're a sign you're kind of making progress. Really lovely-looking things, but declining quite rapidly. They get caught by fishing boats when they put hooks out behind them to catch fish. These dive down to catch the bait and get drowned. So there's a lot of work. South Georgia, they've made a big progress. South Africa and Namibia have done really well. Other countries, there's still a lot of albatross being killed, and the numbers are going down. Southern Royal Albatross comes all the way across from New Zealand. So they breed in New Zealand and winter near the Falklands just because it's so productive, it's somewhere to come and feed. Lots of small birds. So you're still quite a long way north, you're still quite diverse. And you've also got birds coming down from sort of mid-Atlantic, sort of Tristan da Cunha and Gough area. So again, they like riding the updraft of the ship, so you can actually get really good views, get them coming in very close. And now we get to South Georgia, and this is a wandering albatross. So by wingspan, the largest bird in the world. On base, they've got a wing from a dead bird they found, and on me, a single wing is up to my shoulder, and then the body, and then another wing. So they really are huge things. And also, South Georgia as an island is the mountains are huge. It's sort of alpine scale mountains, much bigger than anything in the UK. Again, coming in close to the ship, this is a young wandering albatross, so they get gradually whiter with age. And you just start to get a feel for how big they are and how close they get. Seabirds have these tube noses, so kind of as a group they're called tube noses, which means they have a good sense of smell. Generally, birds have an awful sense of smell and an awful sense of taste. That's why you can put chili powder on peanuts to keep the squirrels away. The birds aren't going to notice. But these will forage, they will smell things out in the ocean. Every so often you can see them actually do it when there's something dead in the water, and they come in and scavenge. Light-mantled sooty albatross, another species that breeds on South Georgia. Really lovely thing. Able to dive a few meters to go down and catch food, but again, come in close to the ship. So this is Stromness. This is one of the old whaling bases. They were abandoned about 1964 when they realised that they were killing most of the whales. They thought they were going to come back and kill the rest. So they left everything there. It was sort of all the cutlery and plates and bedding was there, and people would squat in there in the 70s and do science in the bay. And this is the end of Shackleton's trek over South Georgia during his escape from the ice in Elephant Island. This is part of our base at King Edward Point and another old whaling station at Grytviken. This is sanitised for tourists, so asbestos and stuff is removed. But it means you can walk around it. These are young fur seals, and it's heartening to see the fur seals in amongst the whaling station. These were almost hunted to extinction. They got down to a few hundred in the world. Now the estimate is somewhere in the region of 3 million. So they've gone from almost extinct to annoyingly getting in the way. They kind of have the attitude of a small terrier and something the size of an Alsatian. So they're not to be messed with when they're properly fighting. A short walk round from the base, Penguin River, more king penguins. There's huge numbers of king penguins on South Georgia, and amazing backdrops, amazing scenery. Some small birds, so South Georgia pipit is one of the most remote small birds. They responded very well from rats being removed from the islands, so they spread an awful lot of poison by helicopter. Now they're not being eaten, they're doing really well. One of the rushes to get the rat work done is these glaciers are retreating very fast, sometimes up to a metre a day, and it's leaving these gaps in front of them. And so the ability to do the rat eradication on a big area was you can do one area and then do another area. And as the glaciers retreat, those areas merge. So it was a bit of a race against time to get it done. And they managed it, and it's made a huge difference. This is Bird Island, our kind of main albatross study station, on an offshore island from South Georgia. So you get to see wandering albatross and their chicks. Black-browed albatross breed within a summer. Wandering albatrosses breed through the winter just because they're so big. Along with king penguins, they need the extra time. So their chicks like that will survive through the winter on their nests. There's also Macaroni Penguins breeding out there. They're studied quite heavily. And that's one of the main South Georgia species of penguin, along with kings. Another species that's recovering, this is a southern right whale. People kind of know about right whales as the right whales to hunt, that they're slow, they're near shore, and they float. So they were very, very rare, but they're now recovering across a lot of areas, New Zealand as well, which is a conservation success story, but really what it teaches us is if you don't kill animals, they do better. It's not particularly kind of complicated science on that one. This is another southern right whale just playing in the snow. They spend a lot of time just kind of lying around at the surface. So now we're kind of heading off from South Georgia through the windiest areas This is a fairly standard day. Fortunately, we're always allowed out on deck, up onto this top deck, and you can just watch the weather, see what comes by, and then get across that into the next set of islands, the South Orkneys, and just and go to our next base at Sydney, which is another area for studying penguins and other animals. So we've got the Chinstrap penguins, so fairly clearly got the chinstrap, and then the Daly penguin. So we're starting to get to the really southern species. They're one of the most southerly, one of the most extreme species. Where there are penguins, there's penguin waste and eggs. Where there's penguin waste, there's sheath bills. So they're chicken-like things that run around and clear up what they can. Vegetation-wise, this is about all we've got left, sort of mounds of moss. They don't look like much, but some of those have been there for centuries, if not millennia. So there's people who study them, but when moving around, you've got to be very careful to what you take for granted in the UK is very precious down there. So moving on, this is Elephant Island. So this is kind of where Shackleton set off. I should have said at the beginning with the map, Elephant Island to South Georgia is a bit like Glasgow to Iceland. It really is quite an incredible trip that was done. We're getting down to the peninsula, so we're picking up more whales. We've got fin whales, which rarely come in close to the ship, but they're the second largest animal that we've ever had, and their numbers are increasing, like the southern right whales. The hunting stopped. Blue whales got very rare because they were the target species. Then they swapped to fin whales, but while looking for fin whales, they wouldn't say no to a blue whale. So they went down to the point of being hard to find, and then they went down again as people were hunting fin whales. Humpback whales, a little bit smaller, weren't hunted quite so much, and they breed slightly faster, so their numbers have really come up very strongly, and you see large numbers of them. Any photos you can get under the tail, because they can be very different. They can be sent off for photo ID, and animals can be tracked from Antarctica up to South America and back through their migration. Minky whales are slightly smaller, but you can see large numbers of those down the peninsula. Still lots of penguins. Gentoo penguins are doing, as things warm, as the ice retreats, then Gentoo penguins are doing well and increasing, as are Chinstrap penguins. So they're the kind of slightly more temperate, slightly less extreme species compared to a Daly. So we've got down the peninsula now, and we've got to our base at Rothera. So this is our main base in Antarctica. So it's got a runway, hangar, and then all our sort of accommodation and food buildings, and then science building near the south end. And the ship will come in and tie up alongside the wharf at the end. So you've got a very compact base with an awful lot of capability, and it really is quite an impressive place. We can go out and do science with small boats. People can fly out into the deep field and do science in large tract of Antarctica. So this is the ship leaving from Rothera. It's slightly strange when you get so used to living on it to see it disappear and leave you behind. But you get an idea of the sort of the bay and the area that we can work in there. But we've got a dive boat, so we can go out and do our work, and we can get to drive these boats in amongst the bay. Rothera has a lot of seals, so these are Weddle Seals. Quite cute, quite sort of Labrador-like, and they're lying around base most of the time. Crab-eater seal, they tend to stay further out on the ice. Despite the name, they don't eat crabs, they eat krill, like a lot of things down there. Krill's one of the main food sources. Leopard seals eat penguins. I think these penguins are fine. They were when I left. So they're really quite impressive beasts. We have to be careful. We can't dive when they're around because we have unfortunately had bad experiences with them in the water. but they're a very impressive beast. Like the Gentoo penguins, elephant seals are spreading down the peninsula. We're getting more of those on base. If they sit around in the shallow water and play fight, that's really fun. If they lie in the middle of the runway, that's more of an issue. But great to have them around. Also fur seals, so South Georgia's been the sort of the core place where they've recovered. They're spreading down the peninsula. Is that climate change? Is that just them recovering their own old haunts? It's pretty hard. When two things are changing at once, you can never be sure, but they're fine beasts to have around. In terms of birds, we're starting to get into a more extreme environment. We're running out of species. The diversity we have at South Georgia is starting to run out. These are South Polar Skewers. A recent survey showed that we've got about 10% of the world population in the area around Rothera. Kind of our offshore rocky islands have produced really good breeding areas for them, and you see big flocks of them out there feeding. They actually breed on base, so we have to study them quite carefully because we're interacting with them and potentially disturbing them, but we work quite well to leave them their space. Wilson's petrels, so it's just the smallest of the seabirds out there. They can nest right down into Antarctica, and you just see them sort of hop, almost walking on the water, just keeping their wings out to balance them, looking for tiny little morsels to feed on. Antarctic shag, so like a cormorant-like thing, they're around, and we're allowed to walk around the point, so we get to get out and see these things. And the Adelie penguins, so as I say, they're one of the most southerly species, and they're around. They don't breed on base, but they're always around, and young birds sometimes turn up. The other photo is taken at about midnight, so we're just inside the Antarctic Circle now. So in midsummer, the sun doesn't set. Similarly, we've still got a bit of green vegetation, but this really is the spot for it. This is an outer island with Rothera in the background, and this is as much as we've got. Whales, we've got killer whales, quite famous killer whales. They're the ones that wash seals off icebergs in the Blue Planet program. That's the pod of orcas that we've got. And again, we don't dive when they're around, although we've never had a bad experience. We know who's going to win if there is one. This is a humpback whale again. As I say, when you get out in the small boat, you chance to get a slightly different, slightly closer feel. We saw this one feeding. We were trying to get back to base, but we just cut the engine and drifted. Don't disturb it, and just enjoy the views. That's base in the background with them. So the cranes are for making the wharf to make the wharf bigger so that the new ship can get in. This water coming out is the tongue pushing the water out so they can filter out all the food that's in the water after taking a big mouthful. And so in terms of the ship, I'm going to take a bit of a cheat and jump over the peninsula. We've got 4 twin otter planes, which for one of them it's a day trip out and back. For the ship, it would be more like, it'd be over a week. But we're going to jump into the Weddle Sea and get properly cold. This is about -10, and so this is sea sprays freezing on the bow of the ship as we were pushing into some very cold winds. And you get big sea ice, very, very remote and completely barren hillsides. And you get to the point where it's almost too severe. You're really just down to the last very, very well adapted birds and penguins. I should at this point just very quickly say I've been doing kind of the animals in terms of the birds, the whales, the seals. If we go underwater, we've got all of the algae growing. There is huge amounts of life. It's just a question of getting to it. And the things that live in the sea, the krill, the copepods, they can feed very happily and are protected by the ice. Things fall down to the bottom, and there's a huge diversity of benthic creatures that are living under the sea ice. These are compilations put together by a colleague. And it can be really surprisingly both diverse and abundant. So when I say we're running out of wildlife, I always get told off for not mentioning the benthic creatures. But down to the last three, the last sort of very, very Antarctic species, we have the Antarctic petrel. They fly inland to breed on nunataks, so little bits of rock that emerge from the ice, as do snow petrels. Snow petrels do better on camouflage than Antarctic petrels. So they're the most southerly ones. And then we've got to finish with the classic Antarctic animal of the emperor penguin, which is as I'm sure most people know, breed on the sea ice through the winter. And seeing these down in their environment is very, very special.
Wow, thank you, Hugh. So I think what struck me was the sort of personal touch to these images, which contrasts what we're used to seeing, which is quite slick and sometimes over-dramatized. And this, for me at least, and I don't know if you agree, really brought it home in a very different way. Right, Q&A. I hope some of you have thought of some questions that you'd like to ask. You there, young lady. How long, good question. How long does it take for a penguin egg to hatch?
So for the smaller penguins, then I think it's about 3 weeks. I don't know for emperor penguins, but it'd be a bit longer. Sorry.
Want to ask a question?
How long can albatross go underwater for?
One more time. How long can?
Albatross go underwater for?
Thank you. How long can albatrosses go underwater for?
So albatrosses are very, very good at flying, but they can only kind of dunk down underwater. So they're probably not as good as humans at diving down. The problem when they get caught by the fishing boats is as the hooks are being put in the water, they can kind of catch them as they go in. So a lot of the mitigation, the ways of trying to stop the albatross getting caught, is if you can just keep them a little bit away from the boats, then the hooks can get deep enough and then everything's okay. So they tow like coloured plastic streamers. It doesn't have to be a high-tech solution.
Right, we've got another question here at the back. How fast can a penguin swim in water?
It's a pretty similar pace to the ship, I would say. So that's about 10 miles an hour, which would be a good running pace.
Why does one bird have a yellow bit at the end of its beak? I think was the question.
I'm trying to remember. So grey-headed albatross have a yellow line down the top of the beak, which I suspect is... So albatross are very sociable. They dance with each other, they display, and they mate for life. So some of the kind of colours around the beak and around the face will be partly for display and for mating and sort of developing a bond.
Young lady here.
Does it get too hot for the creatures underneath the water?
Thank you. With climate change, does it get too hot underneath the water for creatures?
The things in Antarctica are very well adapted for being very cold. So they're the most sensitive to change. If you warm Antarctica by 0.5 degree, proportionately that's a really big change for them. Whereas if you warm here by 0.5 degree, then it won't make as much difference. So yes, they are more sensitive than most animals.
I think the question is, how long will a poisoned bird last?
When they spread the poison in Antarctic, in South Georgia to get rid of the rats, there was an issue with that poison going into birds. And one of the advantages of doing it sector by sector across 5 years is that although the glaciers block the way for the rats, they don't block the way for the birds. So there wasn't very much secondary. There was a few skewers got poisoned, but there was a chance that the birds could move back into the area that had been baited. It turned out not to be much of an issue, but it was one of the safety measures rather than baiting the whole place at once, which would have harmed the birds just as much.
I think we've got time for one more question before we break off. Who wants to ask a final question? Yes.
Are penguins as cute as they look?
Well, I once phoned home...
Sorry, can I just repeat the question? Are penguins as cute as they look? Can you walk past them, or do they bite you?
They won't bite you. They might shout at you, and they'll let you know if you're near their nest or near their eggs, then they've got every right to tell you to back off. I did once phone home and complain to my mum that a young penguin had been sat outside my bedroom window calling all night. And she wasn't very sympathetic after I'd been obsessed with penguins from this eye. But apparently I wasn't allowed to have them as a problem anymore.
And Hugh, can the audience find you after this talk?
Yes, so I'm on the Polar Robotics stand with the gliders and the Eco Sub. So that's proper job area. So yeah, I have a lot of photos on the phone, so if people want to come up and ask more questions. One thing I realised I didn't say about the albatross is that they can live up to 50 or 60 years. So when one gets killed, it's really a big problem. They breed very slowly. So that's just one thing I just realised I didn't say.
Right, so with that, can we all say thank you very much to Hugh Venables and give him a big round of applause? Thank you.